my mute on. But this is Virtual Mental Health Monday, where we engage the arts and creativity to explore topics that affect our health and wellness through the lens of arts and creativity. And I'm Kimberly Kirkland with Arts and Medicine, and our mission is to enhance healing and wellness for patients, families, their staff, the hospital staff, and the communities we serve. And we would like to know more about you. So if you are willing, please put in the chat your occupation or where you're from and any personal connection you have with this topic. Please feel free to ask any questions by adding them to the chat box, and we will address them throughout the hour. Also, please note this is being recorded, so if you prefer not to be seen, you can turn off your camera. However, we would really like to see your faces, even if you're eating lunch. Okay, today we are going to hear from an incredibly talented jazz musician and educator, Rob Alley. He's also the director of the Art for Life's SAKE program at University of Alabama. In addition to his music and education journey, he has been on a pathway to recovery for 30 years and has cultivated a philosophy of recovery based in mindfulness, improvisation, and the pursuit of equanimity. So at this point, I am going to turn over to Rob Alley.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. It's really great. It's an honor, and I appreciate it very much. So I've got a PowerPoint deck that I'm going to share with you all, maybe 15, 20 minutes. We'll see how long it takes. I'm much more comfortable having conversations than lectures. I much prefer that. So we'll do as little of the former or the latter as we possibly can. So I'm, going to open it up to conversation as soon as possible, but get the basic concepts out into the world, and then that will give us plenty to talk about. And I love questions and conversation, as I said. So let's get the screen sharing. PowerPoint. Everybody can see that okay? Great. Okay, so this is the art of recovery, the process of mindfulness, freedom, and joy. A few photos here to just tell you who I am, or that show you who I am and what I do. Let's put this in big mode here. There we go. That's me with Jason Isbell. If you read my bio, you saw that I played with him and am friends with him. That's at, Workplay in 2011, as it says there. Thanks to my friend Andy Rice for taking that photo. That was at the David Letterman's benefit for the tornado victims in 2011. So that was a great night. There's Paul Schaefer. There, my arrow's not working, but he was a joy to work with, an absolute amazing human being. He's exactly as you see him on TV, just filled with joy and enthusiasm, and it was such a positive influence on all of us. So we had a great time, and I learned a lot that night. I could share that with you if you want to later on. It was a lot of fun and eye-opening for me. Then this is me with Jason at the Ryman in Nashville, which was a really cool experience, as you can imagine. This is us at Lincoln Center, which I have a video to show you in just a little bit by request. And there's some really great stories that go along with this particular performance. In many regards, many of the things that I'll be talking about today about recovery and mindfulness and joy and freedom are encapsulated in this particular performance. So some really great stories I love from this thing. This is me with one of my musical heroes, Dave Douglas. You may or may not have heard of him. He's really phenomenal. And he came to the University of Alabama, I think it's 2016, maybe a little bit earlier than that. I was asked to perform the role of Dave Douglas throughout the rehearsals, because clearly he wasn't going to be there for the weeks leading up to the performance. And I've loved his music and played his music and studied it for many, many years. And so when he got to town, director Chris Kozak told him that I had been playing that, and he asked if I wanted to play on the concert. And so it was just an absolute thrill. I mean, you can imagine like the absolute greatest honor you can imagine from one of my musical heroes. So this is us playing together. This is, as you can imagine, just one of the highlights of my career, just him enjoying my playing and was giving me lots of encouragement there on the stage too. We had a great time, and there's us having a great time. I have no idea what he said or I said, but we were just having a great time up there on stage. So relaxed, casual atmosphere with all seriousness as well. So this is, and so here's the video that I want to show you of us at the Lincoln Center. So it's 4 minutes long. There's a little talking by Jason Isbell at the very beginning. He's a great storyteller, and then that goes with the story that I have to tell about being there, if you care to listen to it later.
Over here on the keys from Baltimore, Maryland, Derry DeBora.
Can all hear that? Uh-oh. Can all hear that okay? No? Some say yes, some say no. Steven's saying no.
You can go ahead and turn it up a little bit, Mr. Rob.
I'll turn it up some more, yeah. Let's see if the volume's good here. Try that.
Over here on the keys from Baltimore, Maryland, Derry DeBora. That's a nice shirt, my friend. We got an email about this show that said that we couldn't wear black. Wear all black clothes. So we were in a lot of trouble when that happened. I think everybody did their best. You know, we didn't have to all break down and go to a Walmart or anything and buy a bunch of Dale Earnhardt shirts, but I think you did a good job over there. You look good with that one. Bring some friends of ours out from Alabama, play some horns with us. Chad Fisher, Rob Alley, and Brad Doolin back there on the horns. Got lucky they did not get the email that we received. Perhaps it got marked as spam. I've heard love songs make the Georgia man cry on the shoulder of somebody's Saturday night. With the good Lord, Scotty did too, but nothing prepared me for living with you. Locked in, tied in these shackles I wear, tied up the keys in the folds of your hair, and the difference it means I used to not care. Stop home, let me go home. Once the last man to raise up the world. Now I've traded those lessons to faith for the girl. Across the ocean, 1,000 years of my own. In this frozen old city of silver and stone. Ships in the harbor and birds on the bluffs. Don't move an inch when their anchor goes up. And the difference with me is I'm falling in love. Stop home, let me go home. In the night, so long, I used to pray for the daylight to come. Folks back home surely have caught out this search and gone back to their own. Ships in the harbor, birds on the line. Don't know when it's when their anchor goes up. The difference with me is I'm falling in love. Stop home, let me go. Let me go. Let me go home.
All right. So we can go back and talk about some of that story later if you wish. So everybody's got to start somewhere, right? So this is me in my bedroom in Abilene, Texas, at the age of 12 or somewhere close to that, with horrible posture. I would never tell any of my students to play like that anymore. But you do what you can. The music is over here to the right. I'm looking at. I think the story in my family is that it was probably Beautiful Dreamer, and there were lots of laughs coming from the living room when I started playing Beautiful Dreamer. So, and that went on for about 5 years. I did quite well, overcame a lot of adversity. I have really, in some instances, crippling stage fright that appeared very early on, just in chair tests in 7th grade band. My mom, who's a marriage and family therapist, helped me through a lot of that. We did some relaxation techniques, and I really learned to overcome that to a certain degree. And then went all the way through high school and made All-State in my sophomore year in Texas, which is a pretty big deal. And then continued on and seemed to be doing okay. And then I hit a wall and hit some rough times, and through some family circumstances that caused me to really delve into drugs and alcohol, which led to this, which is kind of tells you a lot. I actually wound up in jail, not prison, but jail. I stole a car, a Corvette, a 1976, I believe it was, black Corvette, completely redone, chrome and black. It was beautiful, and we wrecked it. So we were having a good time and wrecked it, and that was not a good time after that. So we were arrested, and I was in jail for 30 days on my lawyer's advice, and then he also advised that I go to drug treatment for 30 days. In the middle of the treatment center experience, my mother came and told me that the grand jury had no-billed me. So basically, they threw my case out. So very, very lucky set of circumstances that I was not a felon, am not a felon. And also, just to give you an indication of the sense of humor in my family, which has really helped me all along the way. My stepfather was one of the funniest human beings I know. And I asked my mom about this bumper sticker not too long ago. She said they got it at a truck stop. It's somewhere in the midst of my being in jail. They walked into a truck stop, and there it was. And she thought that she should probably just go ahead and buy that. So, gives you an indication of trying to keep things light as they possibly can be in a really horrible time for our family. And so, through a couple more years of just really struggling through with addiction, that first treatment center did not take. I was not ready for that. Went back out for a couple more years and explored the good times of having a good time. And then eventually decided to get my life back in order and made the commitment to do that. And that's led me to what I'm going to talk to you about today. And that's the art of recovery. And my pedagogy in the Honors College here at the university really is centered very much around that, and not just the musical elements and the improvisatory elements, but the recovery elements as well. And I tend to not share that with the students as much, not because I'm not ashamed of it, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because it just simply doesn't apply. I can teach them techniques and ideas and concepts without them knowing that. And it does come up from time to time, and it is always helpful when it does. And they relate to that. Of course, many kids today have somewhat of a dependency on social media, Instagram, Twitter, all those sorts of things. So I do apply the concepts of recovery and the concepts of dysfunction and living a dysfunctional life to those sorts of things. So I really do try to make it relevant to their lives as much as possible. So again, it does come up from time to time, but not always. So this is the definition that I've created for us today, and we'll go through each one of these elements as the presentation goes on. I'm gonna have to move this to the bottom. The art of recovery is a mindful approach to a balanced life on life's terms, one day at a time. It is sincere engagement and creativity through a communal process that cultivates freedom and joy in an ever-changing world, in an effort to interact wholeheartedly with a willingness to be open and honest. And we're going to go through each one of those, or many of those things, as we move forward. Uh-oh. And we start with a definition of art. The function of art is not to communicate one's personal ideas or feelings, quite contrary to what we think about art a lot of times, but rather to imitate nature in her manner of operation. And that is coming from John Cage, the famous composer. And so in this case, in this definition, it's really not the what, it's the why and how of art. So it's the process that we're interested in and is really functional in our lives in recovery. It's process, not product. It's the approach, not the landing. And so it's unique to each individual, just like art is. The making of art is unique to each individual. The being an audience member is unique to each individual. We interpret things differently. We come from our own social conditioning and our own preferences, and that's all a very integral and important part of all of this. So we honor that as much as we possibly can. Otherwise, we start to get into what art is, and that becomes a much more difficult thing to define. It's actually impossible. I think I never ever define art for my classes or myself. I'm really concerned with the process. I think that's the most productive and helpful thing to do. So that's where we deal with. That's what we deal with here. Now, recovery. Recovery from what? And I've defined recovery as an abundance of dysfunction, or we're recovering from an abundance of dysfunction. It's a severe imbalance. We all have dysfunction in our lives. Addicts and alcoholics and people that need some sort of a recovery are just very, very far out of balance. So think about dysfunction in terms of degrees. We think about it in terms of proportion. And so, we all go through our lives all day long and we have things, perhaps we eat more sugar than we would like to, or all those sorts of things. But, we try to balance those out as much as possible. So in a sense, the way I see it is we're all in some sort of recovery. So, if you want to, correct something in your life, something that seems out of balance to you, I think that addicts and alcoholics or people that are in recovery are really good people to learn from, because we've dealt so it's so intense what we deal with to come through and to just be functional members of society. And so we've learned a lot of tools and skills and developed a lot of that. And so, I think we have a lot to give, and it's good for us too. It's good for us to share. It's a part of our recovery to help others. So recovering is sober living. Sobriety is a journey of the body, mind, and spirit. It is a holistic day-to-day, moment-to-moment endeavor. And I've been on my path of sobriety since May 1990. It's 11,000 plus days. I see it. I really do see a day-to-day thing. It is very much a day-to-day thing for me. And I like that. I don't see that as a bug. I see that as a feature. We're all living day-to-day. We should all just definitely I think we should be grateful to when we wake up every single day. So, and that this helps in working with people who are young in sobriety as well, or people who just want to deal with other sort of dysfunction in their life, because every day is different, and we're all on our own path, and we can help one another. I have 30 years, but just today, I have today, just like we all do. So I have a little bit more wisdom and skills to help, but other than that, we're on equal footing. So this is a process of living life as it really is, one day at a time. And I put the asterisk there because we see attachment, aversion, and delusion when we look at what life really is. The mind is a really wonderful thing. It is also very perplexing, but when we look at it very closely, and we'll get to mindfulness in just a second, when we look at it closely and honestly, what we typically see, the default state of the human mind is one of attachment, aversion, or delusion, if we're not being mindful. So if we're mindful, then we can either see those things or avoid them. So we'll get to that a little bit more later, but I wanted to at least qualify what why I italicized the really part of that is, what's really happening. Mindfulness, the Oxford Mindfulness Center defines mindfulness as a moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judgment. The moment-to-moment is quite easy to understand. Awareness is also easy to understand. The without judgment is the most difficult part of that statement, because it's easy to sit and look at your mind. It's easy to sit and focus on your breath, but to see the judgment just whirling all over the place is really the best part of that whole thing. And to cultivate that skill is really where the benefit comes. So mindfulness practice then is simply a vehicle for liberation. It is the practice of freedom, since freedom is only available in the present moment. And it is very much a practice. It is not something that you learn and then you just let go. You have to continually practice it day by day, moment by moment. So there we are back again, day by day and moment to moment practice. A balanced life, there's a fancy word there, equanimity. I like the term equanimity because it is most easily defined as an unshakable balance. So we're really after this equanimity, but it's really difficult to achieve, an unshakable balance. Everyone gets off balance from time to time. There are external factors, sensations coming into play that we have to deal with and knock us off balance. But the advantage of this word equanimity for me is that I've learned to sense what balanced feels like physically and emotionally and psychologically. And so once you know what that feels like, then at least you know where you're going back to. At least you know what it feels like to get back to it. So you recognize that you're not in balance. And then once you're aware that you're not in balance, you can recall that time, because the past is important for us to remember it. We just don't live in it. So, remembering what happens in the past and the things that we've cultivated, the skills that we've cultivated, is a very helpful thing. And equanimity is one of those things. This is our primary goal. It's an ever-increasing balance through living life as a verb. And that's a concept that I really just became aware of a couple of years ago through meditation practice and through study. And living life as a verb is been very liberating for me, because you think about living life, and instead of having it, we do it. So just thinking about that and that sort of mindset has been very helpful, because it really adds to that moment to moment concept, because every moment is different. Sincere engagement through a communal process, as you can all imagine, or perhaps musicians are very communal. We're very collaborative. It's how we do things. I began in band with a bunch of other trumpets and a bunch of other brass players and a band director teaching me how to do these things. And that never stops. And I have a diagram I'm going to show you in just a few slides that illustrates that. But, it's not just about us. I mean, there's a saying that, we are unique in some ways, we're individuals in some ways, but we are all connected. We cannot escape the connection, and nor would we want to, I think. And in my case, I try to emphasize the connection, try to emphasize that interconnectedness all the time, and realize that I rely on other people and they do as well. And that's, again, it's a feature and not a bug. An ever-changing world. So Suzuki Roshi said, everything changes, and Heraclitus said the only constant in life is change. So Suzuki Roshi is the Zen master who really popularized Zen in America and founded the San Francisco Zen Center. So he's famous in that world. And then Heraclitus was, of course, an ancient Greek philosopher, pre-Stoic philosophy. But you can imagine, you can see that. So in my case, like keeping this in mind, everything changes. Keeping this paradigm in mind is really helpful, because you can see it. It's provable every single moment. You can look and watch things change. Science is proving it. Religion has always dealt with it. So, it's just something that is provable in our lives on moment to moment. And if we remember it, then we don't get quite so rattled, and we can be more balanced as we move through. Recovering is really learning to be comfortable with change and discomfort, or as we say, it's learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's, paradoxical, but still functional at the same time. You all know what I mean when I say that. And it's really lovely to, if as an improviser, to be on stage is to be uncomfortable. It is to be constantly taken off guard and to have to deal with that sort of thing. So if I go on stage and everything is exactly like I want it, it's not much of a conversation. It's not much of a communication. So I welcome those sorts of things, and we learn to deal with them, and we learn to actually use them as assets. To interact with a willingness to be open and honest. And this is a phrase that I've just reordered. When you're in a 12-step program in AA in particular, you get a chip when you've reached some milestone, either 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or further. And the chip says honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And those are the three key factors that are looked for in AA. And so I find that very helpful, and I've reordered it for myself just to make it a sentence. But in this case, the willingness is really what we're looking for, because to stay willing is the hardest part about that. It's hard to be open-minded or hard to be open. It's hard to be honest, but just having the willingness gives us a sense of grace in our lives. It gives us a sense of kindness to ourselves to know that we don't have to be perfect, that we can mess up, but we're willing. It's okay. I'm willing to do this. And you can renew that willingness, and then openness and honesty follow right in line there. And so it's been very useful in my life. Here's a diagram I created a long time ago. I use it in all of my classes, my improvisation and life class. I use it in the leadership lessons from jazz class and the Art for Life's Sake class, of course. But as you can see, can you see my cursor moving around? Great. So the mindfulness, freedom, and joy come from this 3-step plan. Well, first of all, we develop some sense of goals, and we develop our sense of values, and we learn to honor those things. And then we prepare. We, create some sort of assignments for ourselves, or some task to achieve and to accomplish. And then it's a little bit out of order, but I take that back. It's not. We let go. We learn to let go. But this is a letting go of all of this, and this is really a difficult thing for us to do, because what we tend to do is think about the things that we've prepared for and how that's going while we're doing it. But you just can't do it. You have to let go. So we learn to let go by doing a mindfulness practice of some sort. And it doesn't have to be a formal meditation practice, although I think that's a really wonderful way to get in it. But there's a multitude of things you can do to learn to be mindful, but we must practice letting go. We have to practice letting go of all those things. And in the course of practicing that, what we're practicing is being and doing. Because we, as human beings, are beings. We're not human doings. I'm sure some of you have heard that aphorism before, but it's true. We think of ourselves as doing all day long. And, one of the things that happened to me when I was first starting to teach in the honors college, I was in the jazz department at UA, and I was also in the honors college, and I was really busy. And I kept the director of jazz studies I mentioned before, Chris Kozak, kept asking me how things were going, and I just kept saying, "Man, I'm so busy. Everything's busy." And he finally looked at me and went, "So you're really busy, huh?" And I think it gave me pause, and I thought about it for one moment, and I thought, but I'm doing the things that I love to do, so why should I feel busy all the time? And so I thought about that. We went back to these things, these goals and values, and I thought, I don't want to feel hectic all day. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to actually engage with it in a calm frame of mind and with some balance. And so I realized that I wasn't as much being as I was doing. And so I really tried to emphasize that. And then the last thing to do is, once you've really let go of the preparation and you've engaged with the thing that you're trying to do, you assess. So you honestly assess. Okay, we're back to the willingness to be open and honest. And we honestly assess what's happening. Some of this happens for ourselves. Some of this happens because we have mentors. It's a good thing to continue study with other people, and our peers help us as well. So, and these can be combined sometimes, but it's this three-step path, I think, that helps. And you can imagine that these need to be adjusted proportionally from time to time, because, sometimes you have to prepare more. And sometimes you're letting go. Sometimes you prepared a lot. I mean, for me to walk into a situation with young musicians who were going to play some really simple tunes and improvise over those tunes, I really don't have to prepare a lot for that anymore. I'm just letting go and just enjoying myself and being in the moment. And there's also not a lot of assessment. But whenever I get on stage with Dave Douglas, I've done a lot of prep, and I'm really thinking about that. And I worked hard on those tunes during rehearsal and thought about them a lot and developed some real clear goals of that. And then once I got on stage, I let go as much as I possibly could to just be there. And, there's a saying, enjoy the moment. And that gets translated a lot of times to, holding on to that moment. But you really don't want to hold on to the moment. You really want to just let the moment happen by itself. And because if you're holding on to the moment, then of course you're projecting onto the future. And you're trying to hold on to that one memory. And those memories come, I have fond memories of those times and the dinners we had afterwards and the hang we had after the concert and all that comes by itself. I don't have to hold on to those things. So this 3-prong approach really helps a lot, and to adjust as we go day to day to make the proportionality work for you in your individual day or time of day even. I think has been very helpful to me and to my students. And it's just a simple model for me to adjust my life and achieve my goals, because we all want goals. As we say, there's a saying that we plan for the future and not on it. So we create these goals for ourselves, but if we plan on them, we get ourselves into a lot of trouble with expectations. So we plan for these goals to materialize, but then we let go and we let them happen as they do. And oftentimes things happen that we're not expecting. And if we're open to them, again, if we're honest and open, then we can see amazing things happen in the moment that we can then cultivate to a new goal. And we can grow through those sorts of things through assessment. And we have this wonderful thing in our lives now, this technology in our lives that allow us to record ourselves. I do this with all of my students, and I do it to myself to a certain degree too. But, I play a concert and then I listen to the recording and I assess myself. How did I do? Try not to be too harsh on myself, but try to listen honestly, and do that with your mentors as well, and let them say what was good, what wasn't good. So this is the approach that I take with all of my classes and in my own life as well. So now we're back to the statement, and it's probably a good place for me. I have a few other slides at the end, but it's probably a great place for us to open up the conversation. 35 minutes, well, maybe a little bit less with the introduction, but I'm open to questions and conversation. I would love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Wow, I feel so, I really want to bring a lot of what you've been sharing into my life. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is the idea of non-attachment, because you mentioned that a few times, or attachment to things. I'm especially interested in that concept because earlier in the pandemic, I, like everybody, was kind of struggling with, mental health and things like that. And I listened to Pema Chodron, or I read her book, When Things Fall Apart. And she talks all about non-attachment. And I just found that to be really like a wonderful concept. And so anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. That particular concept, and how, if you think about that a lot and integrate that into your daily practice.
Yeah, I do think about it a lot. It's really easy to think about a lot because we're very attached to our preferences. And so, but if you're engaged in a moment to moment activity of life on life's terms, you recognize that being attached to much of anything is really, it sounds kind of harsh, but a fool's errand, because everything is changing. So if everything is changing, then what are you holding on to? There's nothing to hold on to. And so you're really, it's delusion. It's ignorance of what is really in front of your face. So it's really difficult to do. And it's quite complicated and complex to talk about. But if you think about it in simple terms, and you try to view it in simple terms as much as possible, the non-attachment is a Buddhist term that is very interesting to think about with that phraseology, because non-attachment implies that you're not letting go of anything, that you actually haven't attached to anything to begin with. So that's a really great place to start, I think. It is hard to develop goals and adhere to your values without attaching to something, and so it gets quite complicated. And I'm not a scholar, so I can't really go into a nice long conversation about it. But all I can say is in my own life, I try to think about things in terms of non-attachment. I try to think about things in terms of just engaging with the present moment and renewing my commitment to my values. Generosity is one of my values that I think about often. And so just to be generous with the things that I've learned is enough for me a lot of times. And I don't have to be attached to them. And not being attached to them means that they can change to a certain degree too. We don't, being dogmatic about things really becomes problematic because our views get crystallized, and then we start to think about other people as different from us and separate from us, and forget that we're all struggling along with this thing. One of the things I say to my students a lot of times is embrace the struggle. It's a phrase that I really love to use, and they really like a lot, because it kind of gives you this visualization of grabbing something, but not holding on too tightly, embracing it like you would embrace your family members, but you wouldn't hold on to them. You just embrace them and give them a hug because it's there. There's a struggle there. And that struggle can be very helpful, but you don't want to hold on to it too much because, again, we get out of balance. There starts to be dysfunction there, and nobody wants to be held on to anyway. So I think it's, hopefully I've answered your question as much as I possibly can, but I think it's a really great thing to think about and to talk about with other people, and to think about in terms of non-attachment rather than letting go all the time. I mean, letting go is clearly very important, but just to think about those in different terms. Does that help?
Yes, no, that's great. And I just think about that also, if you can kind of practice some of that non-attachment, then, with that, I feel like you can be more open to kind of self-compassion and embracing imperfection, kind of like you had mentioned earlier. At this time, I want to just mention to our guests, our participants out there, please, if you have anything that you would like to ask Rob, please put it in the chat. And Rob, just for your information, we've got a number of people who know you personally and are musicians and artists, but we also have a lot of people in healthcare and in addiction recovery and mental health. So just to let you know who's here. I do have another question. You mentioned your students. I would love to hear more about your class and program in general that you teach at University of Alabama and the Honors College, and then also, the work that you do for kind of like in healthcare with physicians and, all different groups, infusing kind of this art of improvisation into, all aspects of life. And what does that look like? And, what do you hope people and your students take away from your class?
How long do we have? That's a lot. Okay. I see all of these as metaphor for all sorts of different things. I mean, the improvisatory aspect is I see us all as improvisers, and it's again by degrees. You write a book, but there's a lot of improvisation going on there. There's clearly editing and there's refining. And so it's not as much in the moment, but the in the moment activity is an improvisation. And so if you'll let yourself be there, no matter what it is that you're doing, then you can really feel free. I mean, it's what we're looking for is a sense of freedom and liberation. And rather than feeling, rather than feeling like in the middle of working on the process, we're in the middle of working on the product. What we really want to do is engage with the process as much as possible. And then the product will come out as honest as it can be and as pure as it can be. So, I mean, I think the easiest way to think about all these things as far as I could talk more specifically about the Art for Life's Sake class, because we use art as a metaphor for life, and the subjectivity in particular. I emphasize and try to bring out the subjectivity in all of those things rather than say to people, this is what art is, this is what you should love. This is how we were taught a lot of times about art and about life and about other subjective subjects. Is like, this is, Beethoven's important. And so you need to know Beethoven. And if you don't know Beethoven, then there's clearly something wrong with you. You're either uncultured or not intelligent enough to get it, or, Stravinsky, Stravinsky is the guy. You got to get Stravinsky. But to say that to a 20-year-old kid from West Texas like myself, I've always been very inquisitive, and I actually really loved Stravinsky when I was in high school because I was a weird kid. But, I think to say that to some people, that sort of thing in that sort of way is only damaging to the relationship between the teacher and the student. It doesn't foster a sense of collaboration. And I know for myself, I've learned so much from my students just thinking about what it is that they're going through and listening to their conversations and having conversations with them, that I feel like I've really tried to emphasize that subjective nature of art so that they can implement that in their life, and these concepts of being an artful person and the process of artful art making in their lives as much as possible to create tools and skills and give them some sense of agency over their lives. Because, when college kids go through college, they go through high school and then they come to college, and many of them have this conception that they're going to leave college and their lives are going to be static. They're going to get a job and they're going to stay in that job, and the job's going to be the way they imagined it to be. And that's really talk about a lot of delusion. That's not going to happen. And so, I mean, there's more and more people that are not teaching that. And I find that really wonderful. And the kids themselves are demanding that. So it's all an improvisation. I think we come out with some product on the other end of that. I come out with recordings, and they're with varying degrees of formal improvisation in them. But a conversation we're having right here, right now is an improvisation. We improvise with the English language all day long, every day, and we're all masters of the English language. I mean, we're not all English people necessarily, but we can transmit our thoughts and explain things to people quite eloquently and lovely. And if we're honest, then that's a much better way to have a conversation than to just say, these are the things I know. Plus, it elicits one of the most important aspects of being a musician and being a human being is listening, because it makes you contend with the conversation through an act of listening rather than just calculating what it is that you're going to say while the other person is talking, which is not a conversation. So I don't know. That's a barrel of concepts to talk about there, Kimberly. I hope I did okay. I mean, I can ask more. You can ask me more specific questions if you like.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, we have a question from one of our listeners. Let's see, we have a couple questions. Tawana Sparks, she says, hey, and she misses you. Is there a direct connection between your art, music, and your recovery? Or did you use your music in steps of your recovery?
I think just having to look, hey, Twana's a dear family friend. She helped raise me, so she's responsible for some of this too. So lots of great stories with Twana. I think it's a great question. It's really, I think, impossible for me to separate the two. I think about them, they're just so overlapping. I mean, I think about this story of me having performance anxiety when I was in 7th grade, when I was 12 or 13 years old, and how I overcame that. I still think about that, and I still work on that to this day. My mom helped me. I think I saw my mom earlier. I think she's around somewhere, but Kay Gillette. But she worked with me with neuro-linguistic programming was the technique that she used with me, and it was very helpful. We created a circle of excellence that I visualized myself walking into, and then my mantra was music, and it really calmed me down during the auditions and the chair tests and those sorts of things. And again, I abandoned that from time to time in my life and had some really horrible experiences, but with stage fright and just nervousness. But I've never tried to think about them, to compartmentalize them. They all just flow. And perhaps that's just a kind of a peculiarity of my brain, but I'm unable to do that. I think about him in all the terms. And Kimberly asked about Twana's a ear, nose, and throat surgeon, retired. But to think about this in terms of the medical field, dealing with patients is a great improvisation. And we all know what it's like to go in with a doctor as a patient, and you have some things you want to say, and you feel like you've spent a decent bit of time formulating a nice, efficient statement, and they don't listen to you. And all they're interested in doing is reading the chart. And you feel like you didn't really have much of a conversation, and it wasn't very fruitful or productive. And so, that's one of the things that I talked to the College of Community Health Sciences about when we did our improvised life presentation for them was, through all aspects of the art of medicine, it is an improvisation. It is about tending to the patients. It is about learning yourself, new skills. It's not just about going and getting new credentials or going and doing the professional development work that you're required to do. It's about listening to the patients and doing that. So, it's hard for me to compartmentalize them. I don't even try to. I just let them all flow together. How's that?
Thank you. Okay, we have another question from Joshua Wu, and it is, Rob, you mentioned milestones in recovery, for example, getting the chip after so many weeks, months, etc. What are your thoughts on the measure of progress on the road to recovery? And does it necessarily need to be quantified?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be quantified at all. I think you get yourself into a lot of trouble if you quantify things. Josh is a former student. Hey, Josh, thanks for coming. I get myself in trouble if I quantify it. Then I start to think about myself as better than other people and better than myself, better than my former self. And I'd rather just let the recovery guide my intuition, and letting me interact as honestly as possible. That's not to say that I wasn't really proud of the milestones. It's an important thing. Early in my recovery, it was really important for me to pat myself on the back and let other people pat me on the back because I was so beaten down. Kimberly, you were talking about just being hard on yourself, but I mean, I was so beaten down and so beaten. I had beaten myself up so much because I had done so many things that were without, outside of my personal set of values that I felt really ashamed of myself. And so to have myself and a group of people congratulate me and support me and tell me that I was doing good, it lends itself to the communal aspect of what I'm talking about here today. And that's enough of a milestone for me. I don't think about it in terms of, 30 years is like a year. I'm a completely different person. If we're going back to that, everything changes. I'm a completely different person, but I'm not completely different because I had this idea, this specific idea in mind of what I wanted to be when I turned 50. I'm about to be 51 years old, and I tell the students sometimes, if when I was your age, when I was 20, 21, 22 years old, if you'd told me that I would have been teaching a program at the University of Alabama in the Honors College that I created myself based around my own set of values and core principles and expertise, the things that I do, there's so many things in there that I would have told you were insane. First of all, Honors College, I was not a good student, not because I'm not smart, but because I didn't really care about school much of the time. I didn't care about a lot of the things that people were trying to teach me and the way that they were teaching me. And so I was in and out, and we can get in, we could talk about my professional career and quitting school and coming back and quitting school and coming back. I did that quite a long time, but I was never an honors type student. So to teach in the Honors College seemed very, very foreign to me, fish out of water. But, I was encouraged by the deans that invited me to be a part of the Honors College. And they continued to tell me that I was doing good things and listening to the students and all that stuff. So, all of those things I mentioned about what I'm doing in the Honors College right now would have seemed incredibly foreign to me, in addition to the fact that there was no Honors College in the University of Alabama when I was 20. So how would I know? And why would I need to know? For me, it's just unnecessary. Again, to go back to the setting goals thing, setting goals is clearly important. And some people are happy with that. Some people are happy to say, I want to be, I think Josh said he wanted to be a psychiatrist, that's studying to be a psychiatrist. Well, that's great. And a specific goal of studying to be a psychiatrist is, I think, an honorable and really noble goal. But to have a very rigid idea of what that's going to be like, I think is problematic. So I don't know. I kind of spoke around what you were asking, but I think milestones are important to a certain degree. But again, if we attach ourselves to them, then we start fantasizing and romanticizing the past, and then we're attaching ourselves to it again. And that is, as we've seen, problematic. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, so I have a question as well about your spirituality, and how have you always been had a spiritual practice, been spiritual, or kind of how did that develop over the course of your life and recovery?
Yeah, I can't say that I was always spiritual. I certainly have not always had a spiritual practice. I grew up in a religious environment, Christian religious environment that didn't really suit me. It didn't help me stay sober. It didn't help me live a functional life. And so then when I did get sober, I really started to develop my understanding of what spirituality is. And it's different for me than it is for everybody else, of course. But, it's an evolving concept. It's an evolving understanding of what that means. And I like that. I'm not trying to make it any one particular thing. There's a historian that I admire greatly, that I study a lot and use in some of my classes. Yuval Noah Harari, perhaps some of you have heard of him. He's really phenomenal. If you don't know who he is, I highly recommend. He's a brilliant mind, but he is an avowed atheist, which I'm not. I'm an agnostic. But when asked if he believes in God, he said no. And then the interviewer asked him another couple questions, and he said, well, actually, if you want to think about it in terms of, I'm not in favor and don't believe in the rule creating God, but in the mysterious God, I do believe in. In other words, what is unknown, because we can't know those sorts of things. So he believes in the mystery of the universe. And that's really in line with what I think about things. Is it's a mysterious universe. And, we've an evolved understanding of how our world and the universe works from what it did 2,000 years ago. And that's great. But what we also know is that we know less now about the universe than we did back then, I think. The more we uncover the things that we don't know. So it really works well for me. And I don't know whether it's right or not, but it works well for me to just think about the universe in terms of mystery. And I am inquisitive about it, rather than trying to hold on to things as dogmatic or in a crystallized view. So, and then that allows me to grow. And this is really what I'm after. And I think what we're after in recovery is growth. And I can't grow psychologically or spiritually or any other way if I only think about things in terms of rules. I love to break rules. And I try to know them before I break them, but I don't always. Sometimes I'll just kind of go in and break them anyway and see what happens, because a lot of times people don't pay attention and you can kind of get away with whatever you want to. So I'm not recommending people do this. I'm just saying I do this from time to time. But improvisation and jazz and the arts are about breaking rules, but you do need to understand some of them before you can break them. And the reason that you need to understand some of them before you break them is because you don't get any validation from other people, from your peers and your mentors. And we need that validation. No man is an island. We're all interconnected. So, I think the spirituality aspect is part of that for me, is that it really becomes about other people and asking questions. One of the things that I love about Leonardo da Vinci, speaking of one of the greatest artists of all times, is that he was terribly inquisitive, and he was very clinical about his inquisitiveness. He would think about a subject that he wanted to know about, and then he would write in his notebooks all of the people that knew things about that he needed to ask about that thing. So it wasn't just about him exploring, it was about him exploring through other people and their expertise. So he's a really robust community of mentors and peers that he was dealing with. So one of the courses that I teach in the Honors College right now is called Life as a Scholar. And I'm using him as one of the scholars. And it's been really wonderful to learn about him and his creative mind. And so those are my thoughts on spirituality.
That's great. Thank you. I have another question. And again, please, if our audience has any questions, we do have time for one or two more. But what I will say is, first, could you state again that first person who you mentioned? And then second, if someone is new to kind of the mindfulness, the meditation, and wants to explore more, where would you recommend them going?
I'll type his name. Into the chat. We want to go back to the slides. We certainly can. No problem. Well, I'm sorry. What was the second question, Kimberly?
So in addition to Harari, where might someone go, like on the internet? What kind of resources could someone find if they wanted to learn more about, meditation, mindfulness, and really your philosophies? Do you have a website where people can go as well?
I don't have a website. That's kind of in process. I do so many different things. It's really hard to create a website and feel good about it. So I've started several times and never really got around to it. But, one of the things that can happen is you can send me an email, and I have actually a thing that I created for the students that's just kind of a general mindfulness document that I can send them. I'm happy to do that. And then that has some of the locations, like where I'll go do a mindfulness retreat, or the just some kind of books, podcasts that I use myself that I recommend, because there's a lot of information out there, and it's hard to swim around and know what's most valuable. And it's just my opinion anyway in the end. But if you're asking for my opinion about those things, I'm happy to give them. But I do have a document that I can share quite easily that has those sorts of things. And it's hard because there's so much stuff out there. It's a good thing that there's more mindfulness things out there, and meditation and those sorts of things. I feel like it's great, but just like with everything else with technology, it's increased our information gathering capabilities, but it's also frustrating at the same time to know what's actually good and what's not. So yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. And then we could send that to, the people who are here today. Well, we are about out of time. Rob, is there any closing words or thoughts you want to share with us?
I don't think so. Just gratitude to you for allowing me the opportunity to do this. And thanks to everybody that came, and good to see some of you. I haven't seen some of you in a long time. And, I really appreciate you all being here. And, they're welcome to pass my email along to anybody that wants to reach out to me. I'll give permission to do that. I'm happy to speak to anybody. So it's just great to see you all and great to be here. And thanks again.